How did a poor candlemaker's son with just 2 years of schooling grow up to embody the versatility and fearless spirit of America's founding generation? Meet Benjamin Franklin, Renaissance man of the First Order whose trailblazing achievements lit the path toward revolution and nationhood. From his inauspicious start as the 15th child in a cluttered Boston family, young Franklin cultivated an insatiable appetite for learning and skills building across trades. By just age 12, he entered the printing business under the tutelage of a strict brother, determined to confine Franklin's potential to ink and newsprint alone. But not even dishwashing duties could dampen Franklin's enterprising spark, as he soon struck out on his own terms to practice the printer's craft first in Philadelphia, then London, where ideas and opportunity beckoned abroad. Returning home with worldly experience, Franklin leveraged his growing clout as a printer to bootstrap an astonishing array of civic ventures, lighting up colonial life. Whether launching first ever lending libraries, professionalizing the postal service, or revolutionizing fire safety for Philadelphia buildings, Franklin pursued progress through collective action to leave every endeavor better organized than how he found it. Even the emerging mysteries of electricity attracted Franklin's brilliant, if eccentric, analytical mind in those early years. Who else would fly kites in lightning storms but a man determined to test theories by unconventional means with little care for social conventions? But Franklin's humble bearing, compromise-driven diplomacy, and belief in empowering ordinary citizens soon propelled him onto grander public stages. His indefatigable efforts uniting the fractious colonies make him among the first great diplôme. Chapter 1: Humble Beginnings. Our story begins in Boston in the year 1706 when young Benjamin Franklin came kicking and screaming into this world, almost immediately revealing his curious and mischievous nature by grabbing the midwife's nose right after birth. His father, Josiah Franklin, a candle and soap maker, no doubt let out a hearty chuckle, while his mother Abiah silently sent up a prayer that this child would direct that curiosity into more constructive pursuits. Little did they know what an icon their 15th child of 17 would grow to become in American history and identity. From his inauspicious start as the son of a working-class Boston family, Ben would grow up to embody the classic rags-to-riches tale, succeeding in nearly everything he set his mind to, from business to science to writing to politics. He only received 2 years of formal schooling during his childhood, but made up for his lack of education through voracious reading whenever he could get his hands on books. Even as boy, you could often find Ben lying in odd corners, devouring every word he came across, leading neighbors to joke if he didn't take care, one day he'd read himself right out of Boston. At age 10, economic necessity required Ben work to help support the family. His first jobs included assisting his father boiling soap and making candles at their shop on Milk Street. While Ben showed early talent for business, Josiah could hardly contain his ambitious son's wandering mind and restless energy within their small store. So at age 12, they apprenticed him to his older brother James, who had established himself as a printer. Here, Ben began setting type and assisting in producing the New England Courant, one of Boston's first newspapers. Chapter 2: Running Away to Philadelphia. Ben's brother James soon found himself both impressed and irritated with his little brother, newly nicknamed the Hellfire Club for his sly satirical writings, made to look like they came from a fictional group of thinkers. James repeatedly scolded Ben for secretly contributing to his newspaper, warning that their authorities wouldn't approve of his bold critiques and satire. But Ben's clever words gained quite the local following, leading more and more Bostonians to pick up copies of the Courant featuring his latest mocking missives. The final straw came when Ben dared criticize the colonial governor Joseph Dudley. After one particularly cutting column mocking the governor's policies, James had enough, publicly humiliating Ben and making conditions intolerable in their print shop. Ever enterprising at just 16 years old, Ben decided enough was enough. If his brother refused him a voice in Boston, he'd simply have to make a name somewhere else. Secretly selling some books from his father's personal library to procure traveling funds, Ben hastily fled Boston to start a new life. He soon found himself wandering down the streets of a much larger city called Philadelphia, 170 miles to the south. Knowing no one in town, and with very little money to his name, Ben boldly walked into one of the biggest printing shops, Keimer and Ding, and introduced himself to master printer Samuel Keimer. "So you're the young apprentice who thinks himself a worthy printer?" scoffed Keimer. "Pray, where did you study the noble art of printing and all its methods?" Amused by the arrogant confidence of this travel-worn boy at his door, Keimer quizzed Ben on his knowledge only to quickly find himself matched in every question. Impressed in spite of himself at Ben's depth of understanding, Keimer reluctantly agreed to take him on. Ben swiftly proved himself indispensable to Keimer. He brought fresh energy and creative marketing ideas that soon made Keimer's print and stationery shop the most successful in Philadelphia. But while Ben stayed busy setting type and peddling their popular serials and pamphlets all over town, his questing mind remained restless for bigger challenges than selling stationery. Chapter 3. Testing the Waters with Science. From a young age, Ben possessed an unquenchable curiosity to understand the natural world around him, always taking things apart to see how they worked, then trying to piece them back together again in improved ways. In 1720s Philadelphia, Ben found ample outlets for both his practical tinkering and wild theorizing. He formed a discussion club made up of artisans and tradespeople called the Junto Club, which met regularly to debate everything from new business ideas to moral philosophy to scientific theories. While Ben treasured how the Junto Club exercised his mind, he needed tangible projects to satisfy his love for inventing physical solutions too. One pet project, designing swim fins to increase people's speed and stamina in water, occupied Ben's imagination for years. He tested early prototypes in a nearby lake and wrote fanciful letters to the local paper with grandly fake boasts about his amazing invention under the guise of a made-up expert swimmer, Mr. Martin Frog. This dual disposition for conceptual exploration and hands-on building set Ben on a lifetime course at the cutting edge, intersecting science and society. Chapter 4. Testing the Waters with Women. But Ben wasn't just testing the actual waters with his wild scientific notions. At 18 years old, his head may have stood immersed in experiments and encyclopedic knowledge, but his heart and loins ran hot with a young man's fancy. Free for the first time from his family and overflowing with charisma in his adopted city of Philadelphia. In particular, a certain tall, curly-haired redhead by the name of Deborah Reed captured Ben's amorous intentions starting from the moment they met outside her father's house. He eagerly called on her whenever his printing duties allowed, taking every chance to display his wit and share his many aspirations to travel the world and make a great name for himself. Deborah demurely listened, both impressed and intimidated by the intensity and self-confidence of this talkative young suitor. For her part, Debbie appreciated Ben's attentions as a pleasant form of entertainment, but remained wholly unconvinced this flighty printer possessed either the focus or funds to support taking her hand in marriage. Her suspicions seemed confirmed when talk around town turned to Ben's abrupt disappearance, supposedly fleeing once more to escape his obligations. In truth, Ben still longed to visit London and make good on his dream of continuing his studies and trade abroad, but lacking connections or letters of reference, he found no printer there willing to take a chance on a colonist with no ties. Out of money and thwarted in seeing England, Ben had no choice but to return crestfallen back to Philadelphia. What he found on return cemented the first, but not the last, of new beginnings Ben would come to experience over his long and storied life. Arriving unannounced in Philadelphia after 18 months away, Ben hoped above all to rekindle his fledgling romance with winsome Deborah Reed, but he soon discovered that in his absence, Debbie bowed to family expectations and married a reputable tilemaker, John Rogers. Crushed to lose his first love, Ben did his best to channel such youthful disappointments into driving himself to succeed in business. He reapplied to work for Samuel Keimer, resolving to prove himself indispensable, and quickly worked his way back to head printer. But Ben again grew restless for greater things. His big break came when the governor took notice of Keimer's reliable young printer. He offered to send Ben to London with letters of personal reference if Ben would promise to study the newest printing methods and return to practice his new trade skills in Philadelphia exclusively for 10 years. Ben leapt at the prestigious offer, and this time made good on his ambition to experience the sophistication of England firsthand. For nearly 2 years he worked as a typesetter in London, where he reveled in the culture, old books, and bustling society. By observing the thriving literary and journalism scenes, Ben also conceived of even loftier plans to start his own printing business and launch community-focused publications back home. Eager to return and put such entrepreneurial dreams into action after his contract ended, Ben also nurtured a more personal purpose during his time abroad. He commissioned a special high-quality printing press to be shipped back to Philadelphia, one befitting starting his own shop, but also fine enough to print currency. For by now, Ben entertained visions of marrying not just any woman, but Mrs. Deborah Reed Rogers herself, as soon as he could secure her widowed hand. Chapter 5, Setting Up Shop and Settling Down. In 1728, Benjamin Franklin disembarked back on Philadelphia soil, a man transformed from the impulsive runaway youth. Now battle-tested by life abroad, Ben possessed the professional experience, personal drive, and imported tools to launch his own printing press business. While most other colonial printers focused mainly on job work and government projects, Ben also personally funded, edited, and printed a uniquely diverse portfolio of titles ranging from religious tracts to self-improvement manuals to political commentaries. Titles penned by the increasingly well-read Franklin, like A Dissertation on Liberty and Necessity, Pleasure and Pain, sold briskly among Philadelphia's aspiring middle class. Ben worked tirelessly day and night, directing all operations. Such diligence paid off, allowing him just a few short years later to take on partnership with merchant Thomas Whitmarsh, followed by buying the Pennsylvania Gazette newspaper to become sole proprietor. His industry also provided steady enough income by 1730 to finally earn the hand of Deborah Reed Rogers. While no longer the fresh-faced flirtations of young love, Benjamin and Deborah built an affectionate companionship born equally from their newly mature temperaments and joint dedication to family. As Ben once wrote, explaining their reserved expressions of passion, "We are grown old together, and if not always so fond, we are become solidly good friends who throw custom delight each in the other's company." Over the next decade plus, Benjamin and Debbie raised both their children, William and Frances Folger Franklin, as well Ben's illegitimate son, William Franklin, whom Debbie welcomed from one of Benjamin's early dalliances back in 1730. They also took into their home several apprentices and relatives beyond their immediate family, while Deborah proved ever patient with her husband's growing slate of creative commitments outside her door, for Ben's interests and influence accelerated rapidly throughout the early 1730s. Chapter 6, Civic Duty Calls. By 1736, Benjamin Franklin's printing business thrived, allowing him to purchase his own home and move his family away from the bustling heart of Philadelphia. Never one to retire peacefully, Ben promptly filled his newfound civic independence with patriotic projects for the betterment of his city and Pennsylvania at large. He helped launch a volunteer fire brigade, street sweeping corps, police patrol, and even a library system partially stocked with books from his own overflowing collection. Such public service cemented his reputation as a man earnestly engaged in the life of his community versus chasing commercial gain alone. Franklin's commitments expanded throughout the 1740s to improving town governance, sanitation efforts, and economic policies throughout Pennsylvania. His self-deprecating style, compromise-friendly politics, and sensible plans won Ben renown as a man who transcended petty disputes to promote practical progress. So much so that in 1751, Ben found himself unexpectedly elected to serve alongside the Penn family assembly in negotiating laws for the colony. The erstwhile runaway printer, banned as a boy from his brother's paper, now stood among Philadelphia's ruling class, shaping policy through thoughtful persuasion versus family name alone. While relishing a direct hand improving his adopted home, Franklin soon set his sights back on Britain herself as the theater to enact substantive change on behalf of all the colonies. Chapter 7, Electric Personality Crosses the Pond. Even as Ben actively participated in civic and regional affairs throughout the 1740s, his innate curiosity pulled him towards more obscure research pursuits too. He famously flew kites during storms, trying to prove lightning itself was actually transient electrical flow instead of the wrath of gods as contemporary lore claimed. Tales of his risky experiments electrified locals almost as much as his entering politics. But Ben required better tools to properly study his many notions about emerging electrical phenomenon. So, pulling once more from his now patented playbook of leveraging patrons, in 1757 Franklin sailed back across the Atlantic carrying letters of introduction from the Penn Assembly seeking support for his various colonial initiatives. Yet while Ben went to London intending to get about Her Majesty's business straight away, he found himself quickly swept up instead into British high society, clamoring to get acquainted with this colorful new American dignitary all the gossip columns declared cracked the Pennsylvania agent. For once, Ben became known for his amateur dabbling with electricity overseas. Members of institutions like the Royal Academy and Royal Society promptly inducted the respected printer among their ranks for exclusive debuts and demonstrations. Nobles, intellectuals, and inventors alike packed houses whenever Franklin staged shows electrifying small birds or making spider web patterns glow to visible gasps and applause. Through such sensational displays, Franklin both destigmatized electricity's long-shrouded mysteries and captivated the British elite with larger notions what such inquiries might mean for industry, communication, or other untapped civic potential. As one society reporter declared, he subdues this darkest of nature's secrets as completely he seems to hold London itself enwrapped. Chapter 8, Making Sparks Across the Empire. Benjamin Franklin's grand demonstrations electrifying London's highest circles soon paid very tangible dividends, advancing British recognition of the colony's own intellectual vigor. The Crown finally approved opening a public hospital in Pennsylvania, thanks largely to Franklin's visible credibility commanding both laboratory research and the rapt attention of Parliament. Yet behind the scenes, Franklin grew disheartened by most Englishmen's enduring disrespect toward their crude country cousins overseas. Time and again, government officials assured Ben support for colonial projects only to defer and delay once attention shifted back toward domestic British interests alone. So in 1762, when new opportunities arose to tour more remote realms of the empire in Scotland and Ireland, Franklin leapt at the chance to directly inspire more leaders across the Atlantic community. He packed up his portable electrical gear and hit the road with his usual humble charm and restlessly curious agenda. At each stop, from Edinburgh to Cork and parts beyond, Franklin made a point of meeting local businessmen, university minds, and civic organizers to demonstrate direct potential what emerging ideas in commerce, agriculture, or municipal governance might offer communities who applied such novel tools. His hands-on workshops using electricity to visualize collaborative progress served as much to galvanize town halls as spark wonder ascending the ivory towers. Word spread rapidly of the affable agent from America freely trading knowledge across trades and social stations. 'Tis as if the famous Dr. Franklin conjugates not just charge across metals, but more nobly charge across minds, irrespective of standing, raved one Irish reporter. Much as he did years earlier spurring fledgling libraries and fire brigades back in Philadelphia, Franklin seeded networks of scientific societies and grassroots scholars now curious to maintain contact across regions. never one to forget his roots in the printing trade. Also, Ben made sure each outpost received stacks of overseas papers and publications to help awaken their sense of shared possibility with fellow North Americans facing the Atlantic. By the time Franklin sailed back finally to the colonies in 1764, he returned a travel-worn but satisfied ambassador, assuring at least some ties between empire and colony might persist as mutually elevating bonds, after all. Sadly, politics and pride rarely endure as stable bedfellows. For just as Ben renewed his faith in the crown from afar, Parliament's renewed taxes without representation on the home front rapidly erased any goodwill built abroad. Chapter 9. Rebel with a Cause. In the years following Franklin's return to America, relations rapidly deteriorated between the colonies and British rule. The Stamp Act and Townshend Acts imposed new taxes seen as unjust by increasingly indignant American citizens. Franklin stood forefront, arguing for compromise and continued union with England. But after the Boston Massacre saw countrymen shot dead over a local tax dispute, Franklin had enough. He began contributing inflammatory opinion pieces to Pennsylvania newspapers, urging direct action against abusive British policies. When tensions erupted into full-blown rebellion, the Pennsylvania legislature sent Franklin back to London to argue the colonial cause one last time. But the stubborn Crown only berated their once favorite American, forcing Franklin to finally accept the need for more than words to win American independence. So in 1775, when the first shots of the Revolutionary War erupted at Lexington and Concord, Franklin helped authorize clandestine support to arm the budding Continental forces against Britain. Though still acting as a political agent in London, he secretly coordinated shipments of gunpowder and supplies back to America's volunteer armies. The following summer, he helped draft the Declaration of Independence, which firmly cut ties between colony and crown. Britain responded in turn by trying Franklin on charges of treason, sentencing him to death if ever caught on English soil again. Unsurprisingly, Franklin didn't stick around waiting for a hanging. He fled London for France, where he masterfully convinced the wary French court to formally back America's audacious rebellion against England. For the next 7 years, Franklin directed obscure networks securing money, weapons, and political alliances with various European powers to sustain the scrappy American cause. More than any commanding general in the field, it was Franklin's creative diplomacy abroad that ultimately checkmated the British in 1781 at Yorktown and upheld America's bid for sovereignty against the world's foremost superpower. Chapter 10. Architect of a Nation. With Cornwallis's surrender at Yorktown, the Revolutionary War effectively ended, and the United States began its tenuous steps as a fledgling nation. Franklin's skills as ambassador proved equally timely in hashing out the details of what came next. He served on the commission overseeing the Treaty of Paris in 1783 to formally conclude hostilities with Great Britain, and his deft touch securing key concessions laid groundwork for future trade and expansion beneficial to U.S. interests. As the newly minted country began drafting its foundational documents, Franklin also transferred decades of governance experience into helping architect the U.S. Constitution. He infused the effort with passion for creating accessible civic tools, balancing idealism with practicality, no doubt drawing on long lessons starting local street sweeping corps decades earlier as a Philadelphia town elder. While unable to attend daily sessions drafting the Constitution due to poor health, the 81-year-old Franklin asserted his influence, sharing poignant observations forged from a lifetime in the political arena. "We must all hang together, or most assuredly we shall hang separately," he penned about the importance of reasonable compromise to form a more perfect union. Ever the tinkerer, when debates stalled around imperfect institutions, Franklin urged pragmatism to get structures established, allowing future improvements. I confess that there are several parts of this Constitution which I do not at present approve, but I am not sure I shall never approve them, he acknowledged. But everybody likes to be their own carver, so best to first put the meat on the table, and we will cut it up afterwards. When objections flew about fallible men somehow crafting systems superior to status quo, Franklin noted humbly how he looked at overall progress. I doubt, too, whether any other convention we can obtain may be able to make a better constitution. For when you assemble a number of men to have the advantage of their joint wisdom, you inevitably assemble with those men all their prejudices, their passions, their errors of opinion, their local interests, and their selfish views. Yet from such imperfect people applied in open assembly, Franklin maintained faith in advancing society nonetheless. Thus I consent, sir, to this Constitution because I expect no better and because I am not sure that it is not the best. No one stood prouder, watching fellow delegates finally commit their John Hancock in support across the now immortalized document on September 17, 1787. Alas, great Franklin would enjoy little time to witness the actual government he helped envision unfold. His health failing but spirit still feisty till the very end, Benjamin Franklin passed just a few years later at home in Philadelphia, surrounded by friends, family, and the fruits of his multitude lives excellently lived. The accounts clerk turned author turned scientist turned revolution turned nation builder, exemplified in so many fields the promise of America he helped secure for posterity. Words written upon his grave marker best summarize the scope of his legacy. The body of Benjamin Franklin, printer like the cover of an old book, its contents worn out and stripped of its lettering and gilding, lies here, yet the work itself shall not be lost, for it will, as he believed, appear once more in a new and more beautiful edition, revised and corrected by its author. And so ends the remarkable story of Benjamin Franklin, patriot, inventor, diplomat, and impassioned nation builder whose extraordinary foundational contributions helped define the American experiment. We hope you enjoyed learning about one of the most versatile, driven, and pioneering founding fathers who propelled a revolution and birthed the possibilities of representative government tied directly to the people. We thank you deeply for spending time learning just a small taste of how Benjamin Franklin came to epitomize the promise and contradictions that have animated the ongoing American experience now for over 250 years and counting. Please stay tuned for more audio profiles of influential figures and unsung citizens whose lives intertwine in dynamic ways across the generational story of these United States.